Welcome to an emergency, special edition, absolute blockbuster breakdown of a tectonic shift in the world of professional tennis. Stop whatever you are doing, sit down and brace yourselves, because the sporting landscape has just been fundamentally, violently altered. We are broadcasting to you in the immediate aftermath of an event so shocking, so utterly unfathomable, that the shockwaves are currently tearing through the historic lawns of the Steffi Graf Stadium in Berlin and reverberating across the entire globe. We had just borne witness to the most spectacular, jaw-dropping, and season-defining upset of the year, and frankly, one of the most stunning giant killings of this decade. Alexandra Eala, the 21-year-old supernova from the Philippines, did not just beat the reigning Australian Open champion, former Wimbledon champion, and world number 2, Elena Rybakina. No, she dragged a titan of the sport into the deep waters, locked her in a tactical stranglehold, and absolutely buried her in the pit. Straight sets. 7-5, 6-4. Let that sink into your veins for a second. An unseeded, 21-year-old wild card stepped on the fastest, most unforgiving surface in tennis, stared down the barrel of the most lethal server on the planet, and systematically dismantled her. This was not a fluke. This was not a lucky day where the favorite was injured or hitting the ball into the grandstands. This was a brutal, high-stakes, gladiatorial bloodbath on grass. It was a terrifying exhibition of mental warfare, where Alexandra Eala absorbed the absolute best, most punishing artillery that Elena Rybakina had to offer, and fired back with surgical, cold-blooded precision that left the world number 2 looking utterly lost, completely out answers, and trapped in a nightmare she could not wake up from. Coming into this tournament, Rybakina was the undisputed final boss of the grass court season, with her towering 6-foot frame, her devastating flat ground strokes, and a serve that regularly shatters the 120-mile-per-hour mark. She was heavily backed to steamroll the field in Berlin and march unstoppably toward her second Wimbledon crown. Instead, her campaign has been violently derailed, thrown into a grave dug by the relentless, high IQ tennis of a young Filipina who flat-out refused to bow down to royalty. The story of this match is a sprawling, epic saga of unbelievable resilience, supreme athletic execution, and a tactical masterclass that will be studied by coaches for years to come. In the opening minutes of this clash, it looked like a massacre was on the cards. Rybakina came out like a fire-breathing dragon, raining down terrifying aces and unleashing ground strokes with such frightening velocity that it felt like she was trying to hit the ball through Eala rather than past her. Within the blink of an eye, the world number 2 had surged to a suffocating 4-1 lead. For 99% of the players on the WTA Tour, a 4-1 deficit against Elena Rybakina on grass is an automatic death sentence. It is the exact moment where the sheer, suffocating weight of her power crushes your spirit. But Alexandra Eala is forged in a different kind of fire. Staring into the abyss, Eala did not panic. She did not rush. She locked in. She completely recalibrated her game plan in real time, and she began to slowly, methodically, brutally chip away at the armor of the world number 2. Eala clawed her way out of the pit, leveled the match, and executed a mind-bending heist to steal the first set 7-5. And when the wounded champion threw everything she had at the young challenger in the second set, cranking up the speed, hunting for lines, play with the sheer desperation of a superstar facing an unthinkable exit, Eala stood her ground like an absolute fortress. Serving for match at 5-4, facing down a terrifying 15-30 deficit, she looked the world number 2 dead in the eye and fired a clutch, match-defining ace before closing the door and sealing her place in the Berlin Open quarterfinals. This victory is catastrophic for the established order of women's tennis. It is Alexandra Eala's 5th career top 10 win, and impossibly, her 4th straight sets victory against a player ranked inside the top 5. Just weeks ago, Rybakina had comfortably beaten Eala on the clay of Rome. To step onto Rybakina's supreme domain, the grass courts, and completely obliterate that previous narrative is a terrifying warning shot to the rest of the tour. Eala's momentum is now a runaway, unstoppable freight train. Having just captured the Birmingham title, and having just eliminated the newly crowned Queen's Club champion Donna Vekic, she has now buried the world number 2. She marches into a blockbuster quarterfinal against Elena Svitolina, not just as a dark horse, but as the most dangerous, terrifying giant killer in the draw. To truly comprehend the sheer, staggering magnitude of what Alexandra Eala just accomplished, We have to peel back the layers of this matchup and dive incredibly deeply into the intense physical and psychological dynamics at play. We have to understand the terrifying aura that Elena Rybakina brought onto that court. Grass court tennis is a fundamentally different sport than playing on hard courts or clay. The ball skids, it stays incredibly low, and it rewards raw, unadulterated, flat power. Rybakina's entire biomechanical makeup is perfectly engineered for this surface. When she tosses the ball up for her serve, her massive wingspan and explosive leg drive create a downward trajectory that makes the ball explode off the turf. Returning her serve on grass is often described by other professionals as trying to catch a bullet with your bare hands. Once Rybakina gets a first strike, she dictates a point with an iron fist, rarely allowing her opponents to hit the ball above their knees. She suffocates you. She starves your time. She breaks you by making you feel completely powerless, relying on short, explosive rallies that end before you even realize they have begun. Facing this terrifying buzzsaw of a player was a 21-year-old from the Philippines who, despite her massive potential and recent hot streak, was widely expected to be completely blown off the court. Alexandra Eala does not possess a towering frame. She does not hit flat, overwhelming missiles. Her game is built on a foundation of intense physical conditioning, superhuman court coverage, and an incredibly high tennis IQ. Eala is a chess master operating at 100 miles an hour. She uses heavy, left-handed topspin, extreme angles, and flawless footwork to constantly ask questions of her opponents. But the prevailing logic heading into this match was brutally simple. You cannot play chess when the other person is dropping bombs on the board. The experts believed Rybakina's power would entirely negate Eala's craftiness. They believed that Eala's heavy topspin would simply sit up perfectly in Rybakina's strike zone, allowing the world number 2 to hit winner after devastating winner. When the umpire called time, that expert logic looked flawlessly accurate. The atmosphere in the Steffi Graf Stadium was electric, buzzing with the expectation of witnessing a masterclass from the Wimbledon champion. Rybakina won the toss, chose to serve, and unleashed absolute hell. Her opening game was a terrifying statement of intent. 3 consecutive, unplayable aces that painted the white lines. The sound of the ball coming off Rybakina's racket echoed like a gunshot through the stadium. Eala looked visibly hurried, her footwork completely rushed by the overwhelming pace of the ball coming at her. Whenever Eala tried to loop a forehand deep to buy herself some time, Rybakina would step inside the baseline, take the ball incredibly early, and rip it aggressively into the corners. It was a suffocating barrage. Rybakina secured the early break of serve with terrifying ease, consolidating immediately with another barrage of massive serves. 4-1. In a matter of minutes, the match felt entirely over. The crowd settled back into their seats, preparing for a routine, clinical execution by the world number 2. But this is where the genius, the absolute intense, burning fire inside Alexandra Eala was unleashed. Most young players, staring at the scoreboard, feeling the sheer velocity of Rybakina's shots, would retreat. They would drop far behind the baseline, start guessing on the serve, and inevitably spiral into a panic collapse. Eala refused to die. She recognized instantly that playing a defensive, reactive game against a predator like Rybakina was a recipe for a horrific defeat. She had to drag Rybakina into the pit. She had to make the tennis court feel ugly, awkward, and uncomfortable for the world number 2. The first massive tactical shift Eala deployed was an aggressive, high-risk alteration to her return positioning. On the first serve, she stepped back just half a step, giving herself a microsecond more to track the blur of the ball. But on the second serve, she did something incredibly brave. She charged forward, stepping well inside the baseline to completely suffocate Rybakina's follow-up delivery. By taking the second serve incredibly early, Eala neutralized the natural skid of the grass and sent the ball rushing back at Rybakina's feet before the Kazakh could recover her center of gravity. But the true masterpiece of Eala's comeback was her baseline strategy. Eala realized that she could not win a flat-hitting contest, so she stopped giving Rybakina pace. Eala began to dramatically alter the trajectory and spin of every single shot. As a left-hander, Eala possesses an incredibly heavy, curving forehand. She began aggressively targeting Rybakina's backhand side with deep, looping forehands that pushed the world number 2 off the baseline, followed immediately by biting, low, skidding slice backhands that barely bounced off the grass. This relentless change of pace and height was absolute torture for a tall player like Rybakina. The Kazakh relies on rhythm. She wants a ball to arrive at the exact same height and speed every time. Eala was giving her a nightmare of variations, forcing the 6-foot champion to constantly bend, stretch, and generate her own pace from horrible, low positions. The tide began to turn violently. The terrifying aura of Rybakina began to crack under the intense pressure of Eala's relentless problem-solving. In the critical 7th game, Eala played one of the most heroic return games of the season. She threw her body across the grass, lunging to dig out massive serves, refusing to give Rybakina a single free point. As the rallies extended past 4, 5, 6 shots, the physical toll of Eala's defensive scrambling began to exhaust the champion. Rybakina, frustrated by her inability to hit through the young Filipina, began to overcook her ground strokes. The unforced errors started to flow. Eala broke back, letting out a massive primal roar that shook the stadium. The score was 4-3. The impossible comeback was on. Eala held her serve with ice-cold precision to level the set at 4-all. You could physically see the panic beginning to set into Rybakina's body language. The predator had suddenly become the prey. The air of invincibility was completely shattered. At 5-all, the psychological pressure reached an absolute boiling point. Rybakina's serve, previously a weapon of mass destruction, began to falter under the intense scrutiny of Eala's returns. On break point, Eala played a point of pure, unadulterated courage. Instead of waiting for Rybakina to miss, Eala stepped inside the court, took a massive cut at a mid-court ball, and ripped a sensational winner down the line to break for 6-5. The crowd was in a state of absolute shock. Eala stepped up to the line, the weight of the world on her shoulders, and served out the first set with zero hesitation. 7-5. The world number 2 had been dragged into the deep end, and she was drowning. If the first set was a masterstroke of tactical adjustment, the second set was a brutal, grueling exhibition of psychological warfare. Elena Rybakina is a champion. She won Wimbledon for a reason. She was never going to pack her bags and surrender without launching a terrifying counteroffensive. As the second set commenced, Rybakina clearly decided to empty the tank. She turned up the dial on her aggression to absolute maximum capacity. She began hunting for the lines with terrifying intent, unleashing a barrage of 13 total aces throughout the match, desperately trying to bludgeon Eala into submission. The speed of the rallies reached a horrifying intensity. Both players were striking the ball with terrifying force, exchanging blows in a heavyweight slugfest that had the crowd gasping for air. But Eala was a stone wall. Her mental resilience in this second set was completely unnatural for a 21-year-old. Every time Rybakina fired a 120-mile-per-hour ace past her, Eala did not flinch. She simply walked to the towel, wiped her face, and stepped back up to the baseline with eyes burning with absolute focus. Eala's service games in the second set were a masterclass in survival. Lacking the terrifying free points that Rybakina's serve provided, Eala had constructed every single rally with meticulous care. She utilized her left-handed slice serve out wide on the ad court to beautiful effect, dragging Rybakina off the court and opening up the down-the-line passing lanes. Furthermore, Eala displayed incredible bravery by frequently rushing the net, finishing points with crisp, decisive volleys to prevent Rybakina from locking her into grueling baseline-to-baseline rallies. The tension in the stadium was suffocating. Every single point felt like a match point. It was a high-wire act of the highest order, with both women holding their serves in a series of agonizingly tight games. But as the set progressed, you could see the incredible physical conditioning of Alexandra Eala begin to dictate the outcome. Eala's footwork never degraded. Her split steps remained explosive. She was tracking down balls in the corners that Rybakina firmly believed were clean winners. By forcing Rybakina to hit one extra shot, one extra volley, one extra passing shot, Eala was slowly breaking the champion's spirit. The catastrophic break occurred at 4-all. The sheer mental fatigue of having to fight through every single rally began to show on Rybakina's face. Eala played an incredibly suffocating return game, absolutely refusing to miss. She pinned Rybakina deep into backhand corner, forcing a weak reply, and then unleashed a devastating inside-out forehand that Rybakina could only frame into the stands. Eala secured the break. 5-4. The 21-year-old from the Philippines was now serving for the match of her life, serving to pull off the ultimate giant killing, serving to completely disrupt the hierarchy of the WTA Tour. The final game of this match was a sequence of pure, terrifying cinematic drama. Serving for the match against the world number 2 is the most difficult thing to execute in professional tennis. The finish line is so close you can taste it, and your mind begins to race with the magnitude of what you are about to achieve. Your legs get heavy, your arm tightens, and your breathing becomes shallow. Rybakina, fully aware that her tournament life was flashing before her eyes, decided to go down swinging. She threw absolutely everything she had at Eala's serve. A blistering return winner from Rybakina, followed by a tense, unforced error from Eala, and suddenly the score was a terrifying 15-30. The crowd was completely silent. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. 2 points away from potentially handing the break back to a player who could utterly destroy her in a tiebreak. In this exact horrifying moment of pressure, Alexandra Eala delivered a stroke of absolute genius and sheer, cold-blooded bravery. She did not play it safe. She tossed the ball up, completely disguised her delivery, and fired her fourth ace of the match directly down the tee line. Rybakina did not even move. It was a dagger to the heart. That ace leveled the game at 30-all and completely shattered Rybakina's final surge of momentum. 2 points later, locked in a brutal, lung-busting baseline rally, Rybakina finally cracked. She loaded up for a desperate forehand, swung aggressively, and sent the ball sailing wide into the tram lines. Game, set, match. Eala, 7-5, 6-4. The reaction from Eala was incredibly raw and powerful. She dropped her racket, put her hands to her face in utter disbelief, and looked up at her coaching box, absolutely stunned by the reality of her own accomplishment. In her post-match on-court interview, she admitted, her voice trembling, that she was shaking during that final game, running purely on adrenaline, completely overwhelmed by the gravity of the moment. It was a beautiful, deeply human confession from a warrior who had just slain a giant. She had looked a monster in the eye, stepped into the pit, and walked out alive. As we begin to close the book on this historic encounter and examine the massive, sprawling aftermath of this result, we have to recognize that the implications of this victory are absolutely staggering. Firstly, for the nation of the Philippines and the broader Southeast Asian region, Alexandra Eala is no longer just a promising athlete. She is a transcendent sporting icon. Tennis has historically been dominated by European and North American powerhouses. To see a 21-year-old Filipina systematically dismantle the world number 2 on one of the most prestigious stages in Europe is a cultural earthquake. It shatters preconceived notions. It proves to millions of young, aspiring athletes across our home country that they belong on the biggest stages in the world, that world-class tennis is not restricted by geography, and that supreme talent, backed by an unbreakable work ethic, can conquer any obstacle. Secondly, we must address the absolute wreckage that this result has caused of Berlin Open draw and the upcoming Wimbledon Championships. Elena Rybakina was the prohibitive favorite. Her early exit blows the top half of the draw completely wide open, and it sends a chilling warning to every single top seed preparing for London. Alexandra Eala's grass court record this season is now a terrifying, dominant 8-1. She has captured a title in Birmingham. She has taken out the Informed Queens Club champion, and she has now buried the ultimate grass court juggernaut in straight sets. The entire locker room is officially on notice. Eala is not a fluke. She is an elite, lethal force on this surface. Her low center of gravity, her breathtaking court coverage, and her heavy left-handed spins make her an absolute nightmare matchup for anyone. Now, she marches forward into the quarterfinals to face the brilliant, relentless Ukrainian veteran Elena Svitolina. This is going to be an entirely different type of war. While Rybakina was a test of Eala's ability to survive terrifying power, Svitolina will be the ultimate test of Eala's physical endurance and offensive patience. Svitolina is a master of the counterpunch. She is a former world number 3 who builds her game on flawless movement, returning every single ball and making her opponents hit themselves into exhaustion. Svitolina will not try to blow Eala off the court. She will try to suffocate her in endless, brutal, leg-burning baseline rallies. To win this quarterfinal, Eala must completely pivot her tactical mindset. She cannot afford to play defensive, reactive tennis against Svitolina. She must take the mantle of the aggressor. Eala will need to use her heavy forehand to dictate the tempo, step inside the baseline to take time away from the Ukrainian, and relentlessly hunt for opportunities to close the net and finish points quickly. It is a massive tactical puzzle, but after watching Eala completely deconstruct the game of Elena Rybakina, it is impossible to bet against her supreme tennis intellect. Eala is playing with house money. She is surfing a tidal wave of confidence, and she genuinely believes that there is not a single player on this planet that she cannot beat. We have just witnessed a truly defining moment in the modern era of women's tennis. The day Alexandra Eala stepped onto the Steffi Graf Stadium and buried the world number 2 in the pit will be remembered as the exact moment she transitioned from a rising star into an absolute superstar. She has fundamentally altered the trajectory of the grass court season. She has sent an entire nation into sporting euphoria, and she has proven that on any given day, absolute bravery can shatter absolute power. The tennis world is reeling. The draw is in chaos. And the most dangerous player on the grass right now is a 21-year-old wild card who simply refuses to lose. Thank you for joining us for this intensive, special edition breakdown. Keep your eyes glued to the courts, because the Alexandra Eala revolution is well and truly underway, and she is taking absolutely no prisoners.